We have seen the Yatja play the most dangerous game, and even just barely tackle the Xenomorph Queen, despite having to deal with the pesky humans that were only supposed to be incubators. And while a hunt through the urban jungle might be interesting, hunt freaking dragons! Now, when I say dragon, what is it that I mean? There are many types and ages of those lizardy beast wards, as any seasoned fantasy nerd will tell you, and they are all different. The West feared the beasts, while the East revered them. In fact, in some mythos, dragons founded or even helped to found the Qin dynasty. Let's start with the basics. All dragons start with eggs, and once you know it, as soon as they are hatched, they are called wormlings or hatchlings. This phase is generally from 0 to 5 years of age and is categorized by many neonatal attributes. They are awkward and, in some cases, like ducks, imprint on the first creature it sees, assuming it does not see it as food. Sometimes a dragon can be completely independent from the parent and not born within a clutch, just left alone to fend for itself, like turtles or sauropods. I would say worm or hatchlings would not be the best to hunt, unless you are training to ride them into battle to fight the midst of the thread. They are usually 2 to 4 feet tall. Again, you would just be training them. You wouldn't be able to ride them until they are very young. Also known as natal or baby dragons, from 6 to 15 years, they can be up to about 6.5 feet. They start to get aggressive and territorial at this time. Again, not much of a hunt unless you are looking to practice or get some parts to make weapons and armor to take on a more dangerous prey. While maybe they would be a challenge to the Hishkuten, but that group of dumb brutes were never really a threat to anyone but themselves. Maybe the Yatja should hunt them. Then you have the young, or toddlers, ranging from 16 to 25 years. They range in size to about 9 feet. These start to be a bother, and in lore, they only get bigger from here. But at this point, with a well-trained rider, they can tackle any threat. Then comes the juvenile phase, sometimes called drakes, not to be confused with the gender description of male dragons. From 26 to 50 years, in this phase, they usually start to collect their hoards, because dragons like their shiny. In some traditions, this is when a dragon might start to grow wings, and when the wings are fully developed, they are often called young adult or adolescents or elder drakes, from 50 to 100 years. But of course, not all dragons grow wings. That must be clearly understood. After young adults, clearly it would become an adult, from 101 to 200 years. Then they grow into a mature adult, from 201 to 400 years. At this stage, they can be as big as a building. Dragons don't get elderly. Kind of like vampires or mummies, they just get more and more powerful. And they just get older, and this phase lasts from 401 to about 600 years. Only because natural death is a non-issue, there is a stage called the very old, from 601 to 800 years. Ancients, but no less powerful dragons, range in years from 801 to 1000. Then we come to the most dangerous ones, the worms, ranging from 1001 to 1200 years. If they are a species that just gets bigger and bigger, these can be as big as a kaiju. But there is the square cube wall, which can get in the way of great cinematics, and in movies, fighting mountains is a common occurrence, and it's not like we haven't fought kaiju in the past. Then you have the great worms from then on. Then, when you talk about types of dragons, it gets a little complicated. You see, worm can also refer to a type of dragon, which has no legs or wings. It's just a giant snake-like thing, which might be more appropriately called a basilisk, especially if you are using the term worm for age. Then you have lindworms. They have 2 legs and look kind of like an upward-facing dog yoga pose. They don't seem that menacing, hunting them and not be very cinematic. The next type of dragon is the long dragons. These are the type you mostly see in Asiatic, Oriental, or Eastern art. For the peoples of the Orient, dragons represent ki or energy. They are often depicted as gods, rulers of weather and water specifically. And while having a Yatja fight some god, that might be a little much for a first versus movie. But there is nothing to say this can't be the start of something big. Then you have drakes, not to be confused with the term or an age of a dragon or their gender. They look like the Western depiction of dragons without wings, which in some lore do grow wings, but that is not a specific trait associated with every single drake. It's not like every single dragon can always grows new limbs. They're not chameleons after all. Then you have the very descriptive dragon type. These are the type that have 4 limbs, 2 legs and 2 arms, and 2 wings. Or is it 6 limbs? Whatever. And this is the type of dragon most Westerners see in their heads when they hear the term dragon. Wyverns are characterized by their arms being wings instead of having an extra set of appendages, but they still only have 2 legs. The last type of dragon is the Emphithera. They have 2 wings but no legs. This might be a good practice beast, but they are probably ungangly as hell. But I'm sure if the predators liked the hunt so much, they would have a wildlife management system and control the hunt so that they always had a good beastie to kill. Modern wildlife management might not be the way to go on this. By only taking adults, we lose the things that are making the new babies, and thus the numbers drop dramatically. We would get no new dragons. Thanks a lot, St. George. If cloning and other designer gene and IV fertilizations are not a problem, then this too isn't a problem. One could always make more dragons if you knew how to make them. But if a Yatja wants a real challenge of taking down prey that hasn't been domesticated, accidentally or otherwise, you might see them taking down the young and leaving the old to hunt for a special occasion. Maybe that's what this movie could be about. It's finally time to take down a great worm wyvern the size of a mountain, or a dragon the size of a London bus. That's cool too. But different colors of dragons are also usually associated with a different affinity for different elements. Reds can breathe fire, yellow control lightning, blues are lord of the sea and rain and weather, browns seem to have a good ground control or earth or grounding, and just a fire dragon would be kind of boring. Sometimes the dragons might control multiple elements, but if one could use all of them, that would be one hell of a movie. Now that we have that settled, where would they take on this dangerous prey? An unexplored planet? A game preserve? An ark? A Dyson sphere? A starship? An O'Neill cylinder? Or would we follow the hunt that would take us through multiple stages of any number of these particular locations? Now, this would be the interesting. The first hunt of any species could take place on an unexplored planet, but that's more of a survival horror trope, unless it is a lone warrior that survives a crash that now has to hunt to survive. That might be a little too interesting. I don't really see a hunt taking place on a ship, unless they were transporting a new specimen to a new game preserve. That could lead to the first idea, how it happened. But an established planetary hunting world would be more interesting, though mountain-sized beasts could be a problem, especially if we are talking about fighting on an O'Neill cylinder. Unless it is a big one, but even a big O'Neill cylinder really isn't all that big. But again, it wouldn't be much of a hunt, more of a brute force fight. And again, this kind of thing could turn into a survival horror. And while that might be alright, we can do better. That leaves a Dyson sphere. First theorized by physicist Freeman Dyson, it was conceived as a network of devices surrounding the parent star in an effort to harness all the power from it, making it a Kardashev II civilization. But For our purposes, we are considering the Star Trek Dyson Sphere, as seen in the Next Generation episode, Relics. Perhaps this is what that structure was for. Maybe it wasn't abandoned after all. Maybe this was a Predator preserve from the Predators movie. Or, kind of like the one from that crappy Predators movie. This is a good idea for another episode. Now, modern physicists and futurists consider this, a hard-shell Dyson sphere, to be a physical impossibility. But in movies, anything is possible, just like a gauntlet that can rewrite reality with a snap. Of course, knowing these things doesn't mean we can't have our hunters take on some combination of these things. In fact, that might make it more interesting. The hunters having to change tactics and adapt on the run, taking the fight on up the ladder. This could be compounded by the Hishku-10 trying to horn in on their territory, and the coup de grace, the slaying of a mountain-sized kaiju from the inside, taking out his brain blade by a clutch of dragons that seem to know what's coming. But the hunt must go on. When the surviving trio of Yatja, containing both men and women elites, finally locate the mountain-sized great worm ribbon dragon kaiju, and it ends as the brainstem is severed. Wouldn't that be a great movie? Thank you for listening. If you liked it, please like and subscribe. Comment below for any issues or great ideas you may have. Don't party too hard.